So let's get into the first one. The first one is a topic that I kind of spoke a little on during my segment with Mark Childress back before Father's Day on the Roar 105.5 with Mark on Saturday morning. It's a great topic, I believe, because it's something that I think all Clemson fans would really love to have, and that's that Heisman Trophy, that one trophy that Clemson does not have. So we wanted to talk about, expend a little bit more. I don't know. Is that the right word? I don't know. But go a little bit further into that Heisman Trophy talk to see if he could really do it or not, kind of talk about what our thoughts are on it. Deshaun lost it. He had a good chance. He lost it because, to be honest with you, he wasn't flashy enough. And in my opinion, he was really good at the postseason and winning championships. Just during the season, he had kind of an interception bug a little bit that people kind of picked on him a lot about. Lamar Jackson won it. And Alan, what the players said after he won it, they said, how do you win a Heisman? And the players on Clemson said, you must have to lose your last 3 games.
Right, absolutely. And that's why a lot of the reason is I think that people wanted Deshaun to win it. Obviously, he was able to have postseason success as well, but we all know that the Heisman doesn't always take that into account. And we're always going to be bitter that Deshaun didn't win it because we thought he was deserving and, best player, best team kind of thing. But, we move on to Trevor Lawrence, and is he going to be able to do it this season? Well, the answer is, of course, yes, he can. Will he is a different story, and we'll kind of dive into why he may not be able to have that kind of real easy road like everybody thinks. After you watched the national championship game last year and he won 44-16, completely dominating who most people thought was, one of the best teams of all time in Alabama. A lot of people assumed he was going to be the front runner, going into next season. But really what's happened is you see Tua Tagovailoa at the top of the Heisman odds going into the season. And people are kind of like, well, what's going on there? Well, there's several reasons for this. One of the main ones is Clemson likes to spread the ball around, and that includes the running back. We have a very special one, by the way, of Travis Etienne. He's going to get a lot of good carries. That's going to take away passes from Trevor Lawrence, plain and simple. All right, that's going to take the balls away from Trevor that he can throw 50 yards downfield to Justin Ross and to T. Higgins and all those kind of players, okay? That's going to take opportunities away. Also, and I think one of the bigger factors in this is the fact that Clemson plays a ton of guys, okay? I'm pretty sure last year they averaged over 70 players a game, which, if I'm not mistaken, blew everybody else out of the water. I think the next closest team was like mid-50s or something like that. Clemson plays a ton of guys. People get a lot of reps. That means you might not see Trevor Lawrence come fourth quarter a lot of games. You're going to see a lot of Chase Bryce, maybe some Ben Batson, maybe Tyson Pomachan. But that's going to take away reps for Trevor Lawrence. Clemson does this for several reasons, obviously. They want to, take several players. They want to have fresh legs come the end of the season. Obviously, that's a strategy that has proven to work out. So we've seen success with that. And, then you have the fact that this prepares them. This prepares them for the next step to be the man when their name is called upon. When these guys graduate or they go pro early, obviously this is another thing that is going to benefit from playing all kind of guys. So as long as Dabo Swinney is focused on winning the national championship, winning the Heisman would be great, but national championship first and foremost. Anything else, icing on the cake.
Yeah, I agree with you. National championship obviously is number one on the list for sure. And when I was on the show, I felt like I was really negative against Trevor Lawrence having a chance. And the more I kind of dug into it, I thought, he has a better chance than I wanted to give him credit for on the radio. I looked at kind of like what other players have done, what other quarterbacks have done to try to analyze. I went nerd out on this. I nerded out on this. So nerd alert. But I looked at other players and I thought, okay, well, what did Deshaun do? Well, Deshaun had a good running back, Wayne Gallman, right? I feel like though Deshaun and Wayne had to win a lot of games though. They didn't get to coast on a lot of the games. A lot of it had to do because of Deshaun throwing interceptions and keeping the other team in the game. Even though I love Deshaun, don't get me wrong, I really do. He's my favorite player ever. But Deshaun didn't win it, and he had over 4,500 yards passing, over 40 touchdowns. And I told you a couple of weeks ago, I felt like that you need at least 4,000 yards passing. You need at least 40 touchdowns, in my opinion. The big thing with Deshaun, though, is, like I said, he had a ton of interceptions. Really, and we'll get into it a little bit further, really you can't have more than 10 if you're going to really be realistic. If you get more than 10, people start wondering if you're just, Brett Favreing it all over the field, which I don't think is a bad thing, to be honest. Yeah. But can Trevor win one, and will he win it this year? That's the thing. Can he? Yes. Will he? Well, we'll have to see. Well, statistically, if you look at let me pull it up here real quick. I got a little screen here. So I've got it broken down between the past Heisman winners that I felt like were good to kind of analyze. And Alan can't see this, so I apologize, Alan, but I sent it to you, I think. You can look at it on your phone. But so you got Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Jameis Winston, Tua Tagovailoa, and Dwayne Haskins. And I've got all the things that they did either last year or the year that they won the Heisman. And I have highlighted green. It was the best number for that stat in that column. And I have highlighted red, the worst stat for that column. So if you really look at it, I'm looking at the averages. You don't need to have more than 400 pass attempts, and Dwayne Haskins had more. So Dwayne Haskins had a ton of passing yards, 4,831 passing yards last year, but he had so many passing attempts, over 400, that I think that hurt him, right? So you have to stay around 400 or less is the key. The next key is you have to be at least 4,000 yards passing. Right. Unless you're going to be like a Lamar Jackson, as you can see there, where he had 1,500 yards rushing. And he was the only player, or the first player ever, to go over 3,300 yards passing and over 1,500 yards rushing in college football. So you have to kind of break a record that's never been broken, or, hit a ceiling that's never been hit before, right? So Lamar Jackson is somebody who I think is an anomaly. He's not like Trevor Lawrence at all. So I think you got to get rid of him. You also have to kind of get rid of Kyler Murray because he had 1,000 yards rushing. Trevor Lawrence is not going to do that. But if you look at Tua and you look at Dwayne, Trevor can definitely get 200 yards rushing. Sure. And that's what they're probably going to get. So Trevor needs to get around 200 yards rushing. Can Trevor get 40 touchdowns? Well, he had, I think, 32 or 30. Right. So he didn't play a lot of games last year. So I think he can definitely get 40 touchdowns. Can he stay under 10 interceptions, which you see the only person to win it that was at 10 or above 10, or at 10, I guess, is Jameis Winston back in 2013. He had 40 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. The key is, though, how is he going to me, and let me bring it back here, how is he going to differentiate himself? So we looked at the stats in each column, passing attempts, passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, rushing yards. I think that he can meet each one of those requirements or hit the averages of the past quarterback winners. But the question for me really is, how is he going to differentiate himself? Because I believe that Tua can do the same. And is he going to have opportunities to differentiate himself? Because as we've seen last year, they killed Louisville and he only had 59 yards passing. He can't afford to be taken out of the game with 59 yards passing. If you notice that he leaves really with less than 150 yards of what I've seen. Tua left a couple of games. He had almost 4,000 yards last year and left a couple of games at 120 yards passing because they were killing him. So I think you can afford 120-yard games, but you can't afford a 60-yard game. You have to be able to get into triple digits on passing yards. And so will Trevor be able to do that? That's my thing. You already have your five keys: over 4,000 yards and under 400 attempts. Throw for less than 9 interceptions. Don't lose a game in the regular season. That's another thing I think Dwayne Haskins had against him. And get as close to 200 rushing yards as possible. But the problem with all of that is that how can he differentiate himself from Tua? I don't really know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I mean, and another thing that, like you were saying, the Wake Forest game, the Charlotte game, the Wofford game, the open date in November, which I feel like is a terrible time to have an open date just a few weeks before the voting. Yeah, I worry that he's going to be on the bench a lot in November, and it's going to really hurt him then. That's how I feel like we know what he can do in the postseason. We know what he can do with all the lights on him. But when it's like, what have you done for me lately? And all they've seen is just him beating up or sitting on the bench, beating up average teams or sitting on the bench, then that's not going to be good for his resume. And, they like the flashy guy. They like the Johnny Manziel. They like the Lamar Jackson guys.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when you talk about how he can differentiate himself, I'm sure he can, to be honest with you. I think really one of his best opportunities, maybe, passing percentage or something like that, completion percentage. How many passes can he complete? I think that's probably not a very likely option for him to, kind of differentiate himself, because there's a good chance he's going to be going deep a lot. And those aren't always, the best balls, 50-50 balls, as people like to call them. We like to think, the Justin Rosses and the T. Higgins of the world can make those 50-50 balls 90-10. I know that's what Jeff Scott wants for sure, but it's just not very likely. I think you kind of said it best. You want about 4,000 yards. couple hundred yards rushing. I think he's fully capable of both of those things. Even if he comes out of most games early, of course, this is assuming no injuries. Knock, please, on anything that you can find because we don't want him being injured at all. But I think maybe if he's kind of gets the reputation, best player, best team, it doesn't always work out that way, but I think that's the best way to differentiate yourself. Be the best player on the best team. Hopefully, people will still have 44-16 in the back of their minds come the end of the season when the Heisman voting takes place, and maybe, just maybe, Clemson can get there first.